never said a word, just stood at the end of my hallway every night, motionless, staring like he belonged there more than I did. The house was old, creaky, and surrounded by overgrown trees that made it feel like it had been forgotten by time. My landlord, a woman in her late 60s named Mrs. Penner, lived downstairs. She was kind but odd. Every conversation with her somehow circled back to respecting the space. I thought she was just a little eccentric. I used to rent the upper floor of a 2-story house just outside a small town. In western Pennsylvania, the place was cheap, quiet, and close to where I worked. That's all I needed. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to a slow, rhythmic creaking noise like someone was walking the hallway just outside my bedroom door. The house was old, so I brushed it off as unsettling or Mrs. Penner moving around downstairs. I even laughed about it the next morning, but it kept happening. Always in the same spot, always the same posture. If I turned on the light or even blinked too long, he'd vanish. The first night I moved in, I noticed something strange, but the sound kept happening. Every night, a weekend, I started leaving my bedroom door slightly ajar to prove to myself there was nothing there. That's when I saw him. Just past the doorway where the hall bent toward the stairwell stood a tall, pale man. He was thin, hunched slightly, with long arms that hung at his sides. He wore a tattered brown coat and a dark hat pulled low over his face. He didn't move, just stood in the shadows like a statue. The moment I turned on the light, he was gone. My shoes would be on the opposite side of the room in the morning. Drawers would be slightly open. The hallway light would flicker sometimes, even though I'd had it replaced. I told myself I must have been dreaming or in a half-sleep state. Almost every night for 3 weeks, I'd see him. I mentioned it to Mrs. Penner once, jokingly, trying not to sound paranoid. She didn't laugh, almost wheezing. "You've seen him too, then," she said flatly. I froze. "What do you mean, too?" She looked me dead in the eye. "He was here before me. I could hear it just behind the door frame, like he was leaning into the room but staying just out of sight. Before anyone." As I was heading downstairs, I ran into Mrs. Penner. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "He doesn't leave. Just ignore him. That's the only way." Nothing happened. No strange dreams. No noises. I started to relax. Asked if it was a family member or some kind of ghost story. She just shook her head and closed the door. After that, I started noticing other things. Objects moved from where I left them. One night, I woke up to heavy breathing. It wasn't mine. It was coming from the hallway. I stayed still, barely breathing, and listened. Slow, deep inhales. I reached for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it toward the hall. Nothing. In apartments, hotels, it doesn't matter where I am, no one. But the breathing didn't stop. That was the first time I seriously thought about leaving. I turned around, ready to bolt, but he was there. The next morning, I packed a bag and decided to sleep at a friend's for a few days. Never went back. Never picked up the rest of my stuff. "You shouldn't leave," she said, blocking the door. "What if you leave? He might follow you. He doesn't like being ignored, and he hates being left behind." I pushed past her and got into my car. I stayed with a friend for 3 nights, but when I got back to the apartment to grab the rest of my things, the front door was wide open. I hadn't left it that way. Inside, everything was exactly as I left it except for one thing. In the middle of my bedroom floor was my old Polaroid camera. I hadn't touched it in months. There was one photo sticking out. I pulled it out slowly. It was a shot of me, asleep in bed, taken from the hallway. I don't remember taking it. My blood ran cold. Standing in the hall, closer than ever, I could see part of his face now, sunken cheeks, a gaping mouth like he was silently screaming. I didn't move. I didn't blink. And then he was gone. I left that night. Mrs. Penner tried calling a few times after, but I never answered. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear slow, heavy breathing outside my door, like something followed me, something that never left.